Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch. This is Policy Talks, brought every month to you by the Williamson Inc. organization, our Chamber of Commerce here in Williamson County. And we've got a somewhat of a light turnout on this rainy morning here at Columbia State, but they're all bright-eyed and look like they have lots of questions to ask, so we'll look forward to hearing from them later in the program. We've also got TV audience viewing from Comcast Channel 3 and the YouTube channel, thanks to Creed Henderson and his crew. Also a radio audience with WAKM AM 950, thanks to Tom Lawrence and his group. Our panel today are 3 of our 6 legislators that represent Williamson County. This morning we've got Senator Jack Johnson, our senator that represents most of Williamson County in District 27, and also the Senate Majority Leader. And we appreciate you being here this morning, Jack. We've got Representative Lee Reed. I tried to give him a promotion earlier this morning, but he's not a congressman. He's a representative, District 65, and we That's a tougher job, actually, but represents District 65 here on the north end of the county and west end of the county. And then Jake McCalman covering the east side of the northern part of Williamson County in District 63. Gentlemen, glad to have you with us this morning. I've got an announcement that I have been asked to make, and before I forget it, I better make it. But there was a groundbreaking ribbon cutting ceremony scheduled for, let me read what it says. This is the McEwen Drive interchange or corridor across the mountain over here. It was supposed to be today at 10:30. It's been moved to Tuesday, April 29th at 10:30. I didn't get any of those details right, but maybe I got the time right. Garden Club Court off Oxford Glen Drive. So there you go. Just make a note of that, and all you politicians be there. And anybody else that wants to meet a politician. Gentlemen, you just finished the session. So this is our wrap-up show. Judging from conversations I've had with 1 or 2 of you, it was a busy week or 2 trying to wrap it up. Jack, you were right in the middle of it, representing the governor's bills. Governor got his budget request trimmed back in several areas. I think 179 million, I guess out of 53 billion, that's not a huge percentage, but still some significant cuts. 60 from a starter home fund, 60 million, 35 million from the Duck River water effort, 20 million from the Nashville Zoo, 20 million from a North data center, whatever that is. Tell us a little bit about those cuts and why they were made. You can go ahead and start talking about the things that were replacing those cuts, if you will.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Always good to be here, and I'm glad this is our final show for the year. Not that I don't love seeing you, Dave, but it's an indication that we have wrapped up our business for the year, and we had a really, really good session, a productive session. And I want to say this is my 19th legislative session, and probably one of the most efficient in terms of the cooperation and working between the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. You know, it's natural. I think the framers wanted it to be, you know, there to be tension between the various branches of government, between the 2 chambers. But we really worked well together this year and kind of kept the train on the tracks and had a good session. Relative to the budget, you hit the nail on the head. It's actually a $59.8 billion state budget. And the way the process works, the governor proposes a budget. Back early in session when he delivers his State of the State. That is followed sometime in March, usually with what we refer to as the administration amendment that has some updated fiscal numbers. And then that gets handed over to the legislature, and we have to pass it. So the old saying goes, the governor proposes, the legislature disposes. And so it's not uncommon at all for us to make tweaks and move some things around. Generally, those changes are made in conversation with the governor's office. It's not as if we just ambush and go in and take a meat cleaver to his budget. One of the things that was part of the conversation, and Lee's on finance, so he was part of this as well, is the governor had proposed a number of things in terms of recurring dollars. We always talk about recurring versus non-recurring dollars. Grants to nonprofits who do wonderful work. It's no reflection at all on some of the organizations that he wanted to put some money in the base budget to be funded on an ongoing basis. And we've kind of felt like it was better to do that year after year so that those organizations can come back and demonstrate to us what they're doing with the money. You know, sometimes it gets into that base and it's just there year after year. And so that's what we see too much of in Washington, and we don't want to go down that path. And the governor, there was, I don't think a crossword said in terms of that conversation with the governor's office. So there was no hostility about it. Some of the things you mentioned, we have really wanted to support our tourism assets in the state of Tennessee, and we've done that. Our zoos, our aquariums, you know, we've appropriated a good bit of money to Memphis to help them with some of their public safety issues because we think Memphis has some really significant assets. They should be a tourism destination with Bill Street and Graceland and the Mississippi River, and they have a wonderful zoo in Memphis. We want to be a good partner with them, but we reallocated some of the dollars there. So you mentioned the Duck River, which we'll probably talk about here. You know, the issue that's there, and I know our mutual friend Rick is wearing his Columbia Dam T-shirt here. Everybody recognizes there's a problem there in terms of access to water in that Duck River Basin. The governor had proposed $100 million to kind of be seed money towards some type of a solution, whether that's a pipeline from the Cumberland. We agree that we should probably do that. We just felt like $100 million sitting there doing nothing might be a little bit much, so we took 35 of that and moved it to something else. Left $65 million there, and we could always come back next year and put the $35 million back. But really, in the grand scheme of things, an almost $60 billion state budget, we moved around about $170 million. It's really pretty small.
Where did you add back to? What programs did you add to, if you don't mind?
One of the biggest things we did is in terms of the hospital assessment buyback. This gets a little wonky and nerdy, so we can get as into the weeds as you want. Okay, you want me to skim the surface here. So one of the things we've been doing for a number of years with our hospitals, and since then we've also added in our ambulances and our nursing homes, is through Medicaid, which in Tennessee is TennCare, that's our Medicaid waiver. The hospitals have been assessing themselves a tax, meaning they voluntarily agree to a tax that we use to draw down additional Medicaid dollars. It's a 2-to-1 match. And that's due in large part because of back during Obamacare, the DISH payments, which go to hospitals for indigent care, got reduced fairly significantly. And again, that was under the Obama administration. That wasn't a Tennessee legislative initiative. And so this is one of the ways we try to get some Medicaid dollars back into a lot of these hospitals there that have a high degree of indigent care, uncompensated care. And so what we felt like we should do is to buy back some of that self-assessed tax. And I don't remember what the final number was. I think it was $70, $80 million. That was a big chunk of it that the governor had not proposed that we felt like we should do for the hospitals.
That makes sense. This is what I saw from my typical source, but $37.5 million for College of Applied Technology, $20 million for Hurricane Helene relief, $20 million for volunteer fire departments. Logically, $20 million to replace the Irwin sewage treatment plant. Those are the ones that made the news anyway. Any background to any of those gentlemen that you know any more about that we need to know more about?
Well, the $37 million, that's for a TCAT up in Robertson County. If you recall, 2 or 3 years ago, we put $1 billion statewide into our TCATs all across the state. TCAT, Tennessee College of Applied Technology. We very much believe in Tennessee that we need more welders, pipe fitters, HVAC repairmen. There are kids, high school kids that don't need to go to a four-year college, get an English degree. They need to go learn how to work with their hands. And we have a wonderful system of colleges of applied technology all across the state. And the governor is a big believer in these. We are as well in the General Assembly. So 2 or 3 years ago, we put $1 billion into expanding those across the state. One that got left off that we kind of need. There's a gap up north of Davidson County, and so that $37 million was for a TCAT up there. I want to touch on the firefighter thing.
Go ahead.
So volunteer fire departments across the state, the vast majority of people in Tennessee, at least from a geographic standpoint, are not served by a municipal fire department. It's a volunteer fire department. And they do wonderful work, brave men and women that protect people. And so over the last several years, we've been forming a grant pool that will allow those volunteer fire departments to apply for a grant to buy new equipment and things like that across the state. And we had started it at $5 million, and we increased it to 10, and this year we bumped that up to $20 million.
Since you brought up the Columbia Duck River efforts, I didn't specifically have this on the agenda, but since he brought it up, Rick, stand up. Show off your T-shirt. This is Rick Williams, Congressman Andy Ogle's field rep in our area. And tell us what this is all about real quickly.
Well, who remembers the original Columbia Dam being built? Anybody? Not many in the room. If you're not from here, you can read up on it. But there was a dam built in the 70s. Federal judge stopped it when it was about 95% complete. It sat empty for about 20 years, and TVA decided to tear it down because people were starting to rappel off of it and be on the property. So we had the perfect dam already built, 90-something% complete. Federal judge stops it, TVA tears it down. Well, that was okay then, but the growth we've had, everyone knows Spring Hill needs water. Chapel Hill has 1,000 homes right now they cannot build. They're waiting on water to build 1,000 new homes have been approved. It's a problem, and the idea of a pipeline is one solution, but going back to the original site where the dam was going to be, it's still there. The land is still there. They bought land from private citizens. They wouldn't give it back to them. They wouldn't sell it back to them. They sued, and anyway, we have the land there under the TWRA, and I think it'd be a great project. And I'll let them comment on their thoughts about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. It's hard to get him to stop once you get him started. So. But any comments there, gentlemen?
No, I'll just add on and say, you know, I know that that the folks down south of us do have some water concerns, and you know, the General Assembly is very attuned to it. And of course, the Duck River project it's as well. But I am actively learning more and more about it from representatives down there and from our friend over here. And so, you know, we'll keep looking at that as we go forward.
You might say it's a big damn issue, Dave.
Way to go, Jake. Great.
That's the kind of morning we're going to have, folks.
As
I
we
couldn't
all
resist.
know,
I'm so sorry.
as we all know, political reality would not have allowed any conversation about rebuilding a dam 6 months ago, but things have changed. And so I'm actually on his board that's advocating for that, so I'll try to stay neutral up here, though. So we'll come back to the state legislative bills this year. One of the big ones, probably more controversial ones, was the one about whether or not to have primaries versus caucuses in our counties for county offices. And there was a lot of discussion about requiring party registration for voting in this state. Tell us, Jake, you don't talk much. Come on, tell us what that's all about and what the pros and cons of caucuses versus primaries are. As I understand it, the bill requiring counties to continue to have primaries where they've had them in the past did pass. And so if we've had an open primary here in Williamson County, we'll continue to have that. Why?
Well, first off, I mean, let me make a slight correction. We don't have open primaries. We do. It is against the law for crossover voting. Primaries are the most effective manner of electing your nominee. We, as the General Assembly, our governor, our federal delegation, the state requires by statute to elect us in a primary fashion. To me, it was a goose gander type of issue. Not to steal Lee's talking points, because he did sponsor this bill, but all we did was codify what is practiced currently in the states. Counties that are doing caucuses can continue to do caucuses. Counties that are doing primaries will be continuing to do primaries. So we didn't change anything effectively with regards to practice in the state. But moving from a primary to caucus, it allows for mass disenfranchisement of voters on both sides of the aisle. If the Democratic Party were not to have a primary and they went to a caucus, you're disenfranchising Democratic voters. If you are moving to a caucus with Republican voters, you're disenfranchising Republican voters. So to me, it is a voter rights issue. I was happy to support it, happy to vote for it, and proud of these two guys for carrying it through and sponsoring it.
Did he miss anything?
Well, he summed it up very well, actually. This has been something that has been hanging out there for decades and decades, and I know that there have been efforts in prior years to fix, and I'll call it a fix, to that issue. I think back in 1937, and I know that Senator Johnson actually traced the history of this, 1937, was the law that required the state legislature, the governor, and our federal offices to be a primary format for party nominations. And I don't know why they did not have county offices included in that, but they didn't. And it has been something that for really decades that people have been trying to fix. And with some conversation this year across the state about trying to take counties backwards into a caucus situation. And in my view, that was really to try to get a predetermined outcome. That's my own opinion. It was time to re-examine that again, and the senator and I were able to find a caption bill that somebody was not using for their purposes, and added language to that to help fix that problem once and for all, and we were able to get that across the finish line. And I'll tell you, it was an effort. We worked those bills very hard, talked to a lot of our colleagues in advance about them. We had, I'll just brag on the House a little bit. We've got an extra committee step often, so it might be easier in the Senate. I don't know if it is or not, but that's my view of it. But we got that through our House campaign subcommittee 5-2. And then through the state and local committee 21-2. And then on the floor of the House, we had some vigorous debate about it. Ultimately, 60-25 was the vote on that bill, and was happy to get that done because I think it ensures for voters across Tennessee that they will not be disenfranchised when it comes to electing their county mayor and their property assessor and their school board. And so here's what the bill does not do. There are some counties across the state that have nonpartisan positions. It doesn't make them partisan. We've got some counties that use a caucus system now. It does not require them to move to a primary system. It allows them to continue, but in my view, this was a voter integrity measure, and I'm glad we got it passed.
The only thing I'll add, Jake and Lee did a great job of explaining the issue, but I want to break it down so people that are listening or watching understand what we're talking about, because we're using these terms primary and caucus, and some people may be, well, I'm not really sure, what are you talking about here? So think of the way we do it now is a primary. Okay, that we're not changing anything. It doesn't change the way Williamson County or any other county in the state does it. And over 70 counties, when it comes time to elect their county mayors, their sheriffs, their county commission, property assessors, trustee, we're talking about county offices. You have a primary election. You have early voting. You have absentee balloting for people that are in the military, that are overseas and not here. Most of our election commissions make accommodations for people who are in nursing homes and can't leave. They're confined to a nursing home. So if you're a Republican and you want to have a say in who your Republican nominee is for any of these offices, you participate in the primary. You go vote. You early vote or you vote on election day, you absentee vote, whatever the case might be. And same if there's a Democratic primary, okay? So think of the system we have now for Williamson County. It's a primary. A caucus is a one-time event that's held on a specific day, at a specific time, at a specific location. You have to show up and participate. You have to go to a high school gymnasium or a ballroom at a hotel or whatever. And it is run by the party. It's not run by the election commission. It's the party decides who gets to vote. They produce the ballots. They count the ballots. It's not done in the way we do it now.
They don't allow early voting for weeks in advance for that.
Or absentee voting for people that are in the military.
Right.
So when Lee and Jake are talking about disenfranchising, if you're unable to show up at 2 o'clock on that Saturday afternoon because you're sick, or you're out of town, or you have to take care of an aging parent, or you're in the military, you don't get to participate in your party's selection process for your party's nominee. That's why we say it's disenfranchising. And so this is very important legislation, and I was proud to sponsor it and sponsor it with Lee, and Jake supported it, to say that those primaries that we have now, if that's the way it's being held, we're going to keep doing that. We're not going to go backwards. I often think of the old Tammany Hall smoke-filled back room process of picking nominees. That's what some people want to go back to, and we're not going to do that in Williamson County. I'll never stand for it. We're going to protect the right of all people that are Republican to help select their party's nominee for county office.
Appreciate your leadership on that. The bill that proposed to require party registration did not pass. Can you provide color on the pros and cons there?
All three of us can, because we all three support that legislation. And I want to be clear, don't conflate the two issues. The way our system works now, as Jake said, when you show up to vote in that primary, and that's whether it's the state and federal or the county primary or whatever, we have what's considered to be a closed system, in that you show up the day of and you sign, you attest under penalty of perjury, I believe, that you are a Republican, because we don't want Democrats coming over and voting in our primaries, trying to affect the outcome. Republicans should pick their nominee, Democrats should pick their nominee, and then they'll go battle it out in a general election, if that makes sense. The conversation is you should have to make that attestation sometime in advance of that primary. That's what party registration means. And I think we should have it, and I've supported that a long time. We should celebrate when someone who's been I'm getting partisan here, but we are all three Republicans. We should celebrate when someone who's been a Democrat all their life says, you know what, I've just had it with AOC and Bernie Sanders and whatever. I can't stand that party anymore. I want to become a Republican. And wonderful. I remind people, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are both former Democrats that became Republicans, okay? And so, now I've never been a Democrat in my life, but when someone decides they want to become a Republican, that's great. We should celebrate that as Republicans. But you should have to have that revelation sometime in advance. There was a bill that said, in order to vote in one of our primaries, you have to declare that you are a Republican sometime in advance. And there were various amendments, 30 days or 60 days, and it's not complicated. But you should have to register and make that declaration in advance. And if you don't, and if it's a week before the primary, you don't get to vote in that year's primary. You have to register, and then you can vote in the next one. That's party registration.
Except for the first year, I think, is the way that bill was drafted. The first year you can show up and make that attestation. And then going forward, if you want to change, and I think this is the last version, you need a 90-day, you need to do that 90 days in advance.
Details of that just weren't quite worked out this year.
And by the way, the bill's still alive. It did not advance out of the Senate State and Local Government Committee, and I was disappointed in that. It moved farther in the House. I think we're all three going to work hard to try to get that legislation passed next year. I think they just need to have some education. Some people in our party think that we're somehow excluding people, from coming into our party, and we're not doing that. We're just making sure we have an orderly process so that we don't have crossover voting.
Having maybe a more defined way to define a bona fide Republican might be helpful, because I think that's been kind of a moving target over the years too, hasn't it? Okay, enough said. Hang on just a minute. We'll come back and hold that question. We've got several things to cover, and then we'll get to the audience questions here in just a minute. Thanks, though. A lot of immigration bills floating through the House and Senate this time. Undocumented child education access. Representative Bullzo is in court this morning, so couldn't be with us, but he, I think, sponsored a bill along those lines, allowing schools to charge for tuition for undocumented children. Is that, I think that also passed the Senate, didn't pass the House. And then the out-of-state driver's license invalid. You all were involved in that, but that did pass. What in the governor's?
Yeah, it did. I don't recall the number of that bill in the Senate, but HB 749 was a bill that I introduced in the House and Senator Johnson introduced in the Senate. And it says that there are certain classes of driver's licenses issued by states other than Tennessee that are given out to undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens. And it invalidates those driver's licenses within the state of Tennessee. And one of the things that was mentioned in the House floor debate was, well, I think the one of the Democrat leaders asked me this question. So, what do you expect for people to drive around? And I said, yes, I do, because go around the state. Because we in counties and cities and states across the U.S., we're all border cities and counties and states. And, we have seen in Nashville and even in Williamson County, arrests being made of illegal aliens involved in criminal enterprises. And one of the things in the news right now is the quote-unquote Maryland man who was stopped here in 22, and come to find out he had some criminal issues. And if this bill had been in effect then, he could have been stopped and charged under a state crime. And so that's why we are trying to fill the tool chest with tools for our state to be able to address some of the issues that the federal government hasn't always done.
See any of these other bills coming back next year to be revisited, the child education bills and so forth?
Well, that was a bill by our House Majority Leader, and I think Senator Watson was the Senate sponsor. It didn't die necessarily; it just got put on hold for a year. There was some looking at it that we wanted to look at how other states had done it. So our House leader decided to just hang on to it for a year and then revisit next year.
Bans cell phones in school classrooms. What? Now, why would you do that?
Well, that's not exactly how I would say it. It's just during instructional hours, other than when a teacher says, "Hey, y'all get out your cell phones and look at this." After talking with people in both Franklin Special and our Williamson County school boards, that was already current practice in Williamson County schools. So not a whole lot changes in Williamson counties, but you have kids. We have a problem in not just this state, we have a problem in this country with kids and how much screen time that they're getting. I mean, I've got a stack of paper this thick on my desk. It's a report from the Surgeon General talking about the effects of social media on minors. So our kids spend way too much time in front of a screen versus being outside. We carried the recess bill too, great bill. but telling them that while you're in school and while you're in instructional hours, you shouldn't have your cell phone out. You should be paying attention to the lecture, paying attention to the lesson, or just, I mean, for God's sake, have a conversation with somebody next to you and not somebody on your TikTok or your Snapchat. So,
A lot of arguments out of this crowd. School recess time, I'm sorry, Senator Hensley couldn't be here. I think he sponsored a bill and tripled the school recess time that our schools are required to have. Wish they'd had that when I was a kid, but Lee, tell us more about that.
I'll tell you that I've got a 9-year-old in elementary school right now, 3rd grade. And I've said this in front of groups before. He doesn't know a thing about what I do, but he knew about that recess bill. He was very excited about that. The state standard currently is at least 15 minutes of recess a day, and the feeling was that was just too light. Now, we've got school districts across the state that actually provide more than that. That's a minimum, and some provide more, and the feeling was led by the way, just a group of moms who put together that research, accumulated it, visited with General Assembly members, and really pushed that across the line. That was carried in the House by Representative Sapicki. And it provides that we now need to have a minimum of 40 minutes per day for our elementary school children. And I think we all felt that was a good bill. And I know the kids are excited about it too.
Any arguments about any, I think the teachers probably like that as much as the kids, so that's good. Are y'all going to take over the TSSAA and put them out of business, or what's the plan there on sports in our schools? Jack, go ahead and take that one.
Well, I don't know about a takeover. That's been an interest, and full disclosure, not one that I've had a lot of involvement with. My friend and colleague, Senator Adam Lowe, out of East Tennessee, Bradley County area. This is something he's very, very passionate about in terms of how the TSSAA is operated and their accountability and the rules they put in place. And I certainly know that there's been some controversy around that. And so I think it's the purpose of the legislation was to just make sure that there's some greater degree of accountability there. I think that that conversation will be ongoing. You know, when it comes to kids' sports, people can be pretty passionate about that and how they can transfer and go to a different school and participate so anyway, I don't think we're gonna take them over, but I do think they need to be a little bit held more accountable.
We won't spend too much time on that this year, but we'll come back to that next year. But one bill that I've actually had a couple of phone calls about, wanted to make sure we talked about it today, and that's the in vitro fertilization birth control legislation that it did pass. There were 11 Republicans who wrote to the governor wanting him to veto that legislation, which he's never vetoed a bill yet, but they were wanting him to make an exception. I heard at about 9 o'clock last night that he had signed the bill. So somebody explain that to me. I sort of know what it's all about, but I think there's a lot of people that don't quite understand what that's all about and why it's important.
I'll take it. I'm not an expert in this at all, but I will say that, you know, as Republicans, we believe in contraceptives and understand that IVF has been a valuable tool to parents trying to have children. It's been a life-giving technology. The bill, in my view, and I voted no on the bill, but it was a tough vote. What you find if you go up to the General Assembly is sometimes you support things in principle, but you don't support the language. And that was the case on this bill for me. I think that the language was not well defined. I think it was trying to do some things that were already permitted. And I think that there were some holes that probably need to get fixed next year as a result of it passing, even though, you know, contraceptives and IVF are great things. And I think if you unpack that with some of the other representatives, they would say the same thing. I know Representative Bolso had tried to add an amendment to that bill on the floor. I voted no on the amendment simply because I don't love somebody else's bill getting amended by another representative at the last minute without that representative's consent. And so I'd rather vote on the bill up or down, and that's how the vote ended up in the House. I wish I could add more to it, but I think we need to unpack the language of how it is stated a little bit better.
Explain more what happened in the Senate.
Well, I think Lee did a good job, and I voted for the bill. It passed unanimously on the Senate side. I now do believe, though, I agree with Lee 100%, that I think this conversation will continue. And, you know, want to reiterate, we support access to contraceptives. We support access to IVF in Tennessee. Want to be very, very clear about that. But these issues do have a high degree of sensitivity relative to the types of contraception that are out there, and how that crosses over into drugs that are basically terminate a pregnancy, abortifacient drugs, and which we do not support. And so I think the legislation was well intended. Lots of conversations. I was aware of the letter from some House members to Governor Lee about vetoing it. He has signed the law. We have good conversations with people that are in the pro-life movement that had an interest in this legislation, and I think shared Representative Reeves' concerns about the language and about, you know, slippery slope. Sometimes when we are contemplating legislation like this, you want to get it right, and you don't want to leave ambiguity that has to be determined in the courts. And because we don't like judges, I love judges, by the way. I've got nothing against judges.
One in particular.
One in particular. But we don't want judges making law. Okay, we don't want judges making law from the bench. And when we craft legislation, if there's ambiguity there, we're setting it up for litigation, then it ends up being decided in the courts. And I think that was a concern about the language there. So anyway, a lot of good thought put into that. I think we'll be back next year to take another stab at it.
You dissolved the State Human Rights Commission. You prohibited DEI in state government, local government, and publicly funded college and universities in their hiring practices. That reflects a little bit of what's going on in Washington, I think. Any specific state issues involved there that were important?
Well, I sponsored the DEI legislation, actually passed it on the last day of session. There were two bills that we all supported. One that dealt with hiring, promotion, employment practices in state government, not just state government, all levels of government. So this has implications for our friends in local government, county government, and so forth. And then the second bill dealt with delivery of services. This whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, has become a bit of an issue, more so at the federal level than at the state level. President Trump, on his very first day in office on January 20th of this year, issued an executive order for all agencies and departments to terminate and dissolve any offices of DEI. What DEI says is basically that diversity is more important than anything else. And to me, that leads to racism. It leads to discrimination. I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, that D should stand for discrimination more than it should diversity. Because when you make diversity your number one objective, you end up discriminating against people. People should be hired and fired based on merit. We all support diversity. Diversity is amazing. We're a very diverse state and country, and we celebrate that. But that shouldn't be your number one objective. Number one objective should be putting the right person in the right job, the person who is best able to do that job. And when you're delivering services, those services should be based on need, not just because you can check a demographic box. And so the legislation does mirror what's being done at the federal level. It's not nearly as pervasive at the state level, but there are instances, and we've gotten calls and emails about people who feel like they were discriminated against simply because of DEI policies. And so we want to make sure we're stopping that in the state and all levels of government. So kind of hitting a reset button on that. It does nothing when we have no authority to do anything affecting the Civil Rights Act, and I wouldn't do it if we could. We support that. Those laws and protections against discrimination going the other way are in place and should be observed at all levels. But DEI results in discrimination and potentially racism going the other way, and we don't want that in Tennessee.
2 or 3 bills related to cannabis, marijuana, THC. I was disappointed to see the pot for potholes tax failed. Anything to fix more potholes, I would vote for if I were y'all, but that's okay. Tell us about closing some of the loopholes in the legislation, moving things to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. What's the rationale there? What are we trying to accomplish?
I'd be okay to never talk about pot again. I mean, we had.
You don't want to get in the weeds on it?
No, man. You know, Jake, I'm happy you're taking on this role today. I really am. I really am.
It's been that type of week, folks.
You want to take this one?
I mean, does anybody want to take this one? We did end up passing that bill. Did that pass in the Senate? Yes. Okay, so we did pass it. Effectively, we banned THCA. We did move these hemp-based cannabinoids over to the purview of the ABC, just as much as we have liquor being there. It is an intoxicating substance, and we felt that it would be best managed there. So.
Enough said.
Well, I add one thing there is THCA. This all comes from legislation that was passed several years ago relative to hemp and hemp-based products and CBD oils and things that people can use. But effectively in Tennessee with THCA, which is a much stronger version or has more of the THC in it, and once it is heated, it effectively becomes marijuana. And so one could argue, and the argument was made on the floor, that we effectively have legalized marijuana, and none of us want that, or I certainly don't want that, and I think the vast majority of Tennesseans do not want legalized recreational marijuana use in the state of Tennessee. And so that genie had come out of the bottle a little bit, and we felt like we needed to get it put back in. And then, of course, the regulatory framework, I agree with Jake. It was under the Department of Agriculture, and I think it makes a lot more sense for it to be under ABC. They regulate the 3-tier system in terms of alcohol distribution in the state. Makes more sense for it to be with them.
Williamson County seal removal of the Confederate flag. I think that's been stalled for the time being again. My understanding, were y'all actively involved in any of those discussions lately? Moving on then. Constitutional amendments. I didn't hear anything about this until I was digging a little bit last night to trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. But apparently there were 3 constitutional amendments proposed that will be on the ballots for us to vote on at the next, presidential election or governor's election, to ban a state property tax. You won't get much argument out of most of us on that. Victims' Bill of Rights and removing the right to bail. Jack, give us the Senate version of those. And then the other, Jake, you want to go with that first?
I'll defer to Leader Johnson to go first.
Well, I'll start with the bail because I sponsored that one, and that's an important one, very, very important to me, brought to me by the House Speaker, Cameron Sexton, something he's been working on. Tennessee the Constitution of the state that governs us right now from 1870 says that anyone is entitled to receive bail unless it's a capital offense. Unless it's a capital offense. And my free lawyer here can correct me if I'm wrong, but currently in Tennessee, child rape of a child under 12 and first-degree murder are the only two capital offenses that are recognized currently. Now, when our Constitution was ratified, stealing a horse was a capital offense. And so you could, among many other things. But because of case law and court decisions over the years, that capital offense has gotten narrowed down very, very small. And so if a judge, did I say I love judges? I love judges. If a judge has someone before them that is charged with multiple charges of child rape, with a horrible, violent criminal history, and they're standing before them, that judge in Tennessee or the magistrate has to give them bail. They can make it high, but they have to offer them bail. And if that individual can meet that bail, they're back on the street. And so the constitutional amendment that you'll have a chance to vote for and hopefully ratify says that judges can deny bail for other violent crimes. And there's a fairly lengthy list of those. So that's what it's about. And by the way, that'll put us in line with most other states that don't have this prohibition in their constitution. Now, judges can, that bail or denial of bail can still be appealed, and it goes straight to the Court of Appeals. So if you've got a judge that's just denying bail for everyone, that can be appealed. There are protections in place. But for those really violent people, they need to be able to keep them off the streets.
And it's particularly heinous crimes. I mean, if you guys saw the list of the 20 or so items, you would absolutely agree, oh my gosh, these people are getting out on bail. I can't believe it. So
it's not like they're stealing a purse and being denied bail. This is torture. This
Violent
is
crimes,
aggravated rape.
terrorism.
This is terrorism, exactly. So,
Good. Mayor Ken Moore, City of Franklin, stand up here a minute.
Yes, sir.
He and I share a top priority that directed at these gentlemen. We disagree on many of the priorities within that priority, but transportation is a huge concern of yours and mine as well. Have y'all got anything to offer besides the additional $1 billion you put in the budget for transportation? Is there anything else that we can look forward to?
we did pass, and I think it passed in the Senate too, was one of the governor's initiatives to move the sales tax from tires onto and the transportation road funds. We did do another $1 billion non-recurring going into road projects. We are, I think all three of us are absolutely looking at new mechanisms to bring in more revenue for road projects that doesn't involve legalizing marijuana. But yeah, I mean, it is a problem, and every county is facing it. You know, from Memphis to Mountain City, everybody's got potholes that need to be fixed and bridges that need to be repaired. So something that is very important and it's top priority for, I would certainly not to speak for my colleagues here, but I would say that it is a top priority for all three of us up here.
Well, I did notice that there were two bills that passed. One is the used tires, which generates about 80 million, which that would, I'm sorry? Million. Yeah, 80 million. What did I say, billion? 80 million, which would not even widen one segment of Mac Hatcher, which it really isn't that much money as far as building roads. The other one is sending a study to TASER for something for TASER to study as far as other mechanisms for funding our transportation. You know, we're way behind. The projects we have now are like 90-something projects for the next 10 years, and we can't continue to have the economic development we have in our state if we can only do 90 projects. And so that's extremely important to us in Franklin and our board and our community. That's the number one priority is transportation. So thanks for your service, and you're doing a great job.
Keep pressing on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cut you off a while ago, but I promised to make you first in the, stand up, introduce yourself.
You know, he's talking about registering for.
We can't see you down there.
Now you can see me.
Introduce yourself.
Richard Lane, just a citizen.
Okay, fair enough.
retired. No, my question was, you were talking about registering for the primary. Is voter, is voter ID a state requirement? Because apparently it's not a federal requirement, because they're talking about that. So, I mean, I would think there's voter ID in Tennessee, because every time I go to vote, they ask for my ID.
It's state law.
Okay, so it's a state. That's all I need.
Well, and I'll add one other thing to that. In the special session, we passed House Bill 6001, which, among other things, required special colored, I think, driver's licenses for folks here on a visa or otherwise legally in the country, but not a citizen of Tennessee. And that's one of the things that will help make sure that illegal immigrants cannot vote in our elections, inadvertently, perhaps.
Okay. Mindy Tate, what's your title at Franklin tomorrow? CEO.
So Senator Johnson talked about this was a very efficient session, and you worked well together. Lee, it was, Representative, it was your first session, so anything that you are already thinking ahead and what's coming next session and how you'll work. But Lee, tell us your impression of your first session.
Well, I'll say this, I've got high expectations from here on out. You know, we'll get done early, we'll do other, you know. Yeah, you know, we are thinking ahead to next year. I've got a couple bills that got stalled in either the Senate or the House that are going to come next year, and they're still working its way through committees and maybe even amendments. I don't know. One of those is, speaking of illegal immigration, I've got an illegal immigration bill that I think will be very important for our state, but we'll see if I think it got stalled out in the Senate committee, and so we'll see if we can't bring that back next year. One of the things that I haven't talked about here but have elsewhere is we've got a public health crisis in our state, metabolic issues. And so one of the bills that I got passed was, it sounds symbolic, but I think it's more than that. It establishes November, like other states, as Diabetes Awareness Month. And that allows us to focus on what is a growing issue. 1 out of 7 Tennesseans have been diagnosed with diabetes. And 1 out of 5 have it but don't know it. And I was one of those people. We also passed a bill banning a petroleum-based food dye, Red 40, that from our school cafeterias, that has been linked to ADHD potentially in children. We also passed HB 130, which is an extension of our food cottage laws that says that, and the sponsor actually called it the chicken pot pie bill, because it allowed certain dairy products and chicken to be prepared and then sold at a farmer's market or a food market or to your neighbors. And we also passed a bill allowing for greater control over meat processing within the state, that should allow our farmers and our ranchers greater access to those things. And so I'll be looking at ways to expand our public health solutions in the next year as well, and some things around diabetes that I think would be very important. You guys want to add?
I'm very supportive of all those efforts because Tennessee is one of the least healthy states in America by a number of metrics, and it's something that we should be cognizant of. One thing, Dave, you were saying, or Mindy was about this coming year, one thing to keep in mind, this upcoming legislative session will be Governor Bill Lee's last legislative session. And as y'all know, I work closely with him as the leader, and he is He has a real passion for doing everything he can to make sure the next governor is set up to succeed. And so there are a lot of things he's looking at in terms of unsettled, problems that we can get wrapped up. And they may be small, they may be minor, but whoever the next governor is, he really wants to make sure Tennessee is in the best possible position for them. So I think that'll be a lot of his focus for his final year.
Tom Lawrence is always good for a curveball. And we've got a minute for another question. Tom, what have you got for us this morning?
Local politics. There's a Brentwood city election 10 days from now. We all have friends in Brentwood. We need to be on the phone calling them, says, you go vote. Don't care who you vote for, you just go vote. Local politics in that has taken a turn, and it's nasty. The Republican Party convention was kind of nasty. Now, transparency, I'm no Republican, I'm no Democrat, I'm not sure what I am. But can you make things easier? You got a member of the school board here. The least appreciated public body is the school board. School board, county school board, a month ago, didn't take the teacher's recommendations on a book, and they caught hell for it. Last week, they did accept the teacher's recommendations and not a word said. So something tells me that something about local politics. And do you look at the feds like local politicians look at you?
There you go.
That's more than a curveball. No, thanks, Tom. And I echo your sentiments. We had a municipal election down in Spring Hill recently. We've got one in Brentwood coming up. We've got one in Franklin coming up in October. Make sure we should all be encouraging our friends who live in these municipalities to vote in some of these elections that take place at unique times, and as such, sometimes the turnout is very, very low, and so people do need to be. So thank you for saying that, and tell all your friends to get to know the candidates, get to know the issues, and make sure your voice is heard. There is. I don't know if it's more, Tom, nastiness. I attribute a lot of this to social media. And because when I first got elected, it was pre-Facebook, it was pre-Twitter or X or whatever. And I can tell you there is so much garbage and misinformation on these things that we carry around. And we call them phones, but they're not. They're little computers. And, I spend at least, I used to say 50%. I think I'm going to up it to about 70% of my time when I'm talking to a constituent who either calls me, emails me, or I run into them in the grocery store on the cereal aisle, and they come up and ask me about something. I spend 70% of that time correcting misinformation. They're mad, but they don't understand the issue. And when we can sit down and have a good conversation and I can explain to them what we're really doing, they're like, oh, well, I agree with that. They started off mad at me because I voted for something. But once I explained to them, but see, they were in a chat room. They were in a Facebook chat group, or they're in some so-called conservative group, and they meet once a week, and they get to talking, and they don't have their facts straight. So I don't know how we solve that other than doing things like this. And we do this, all day, every day, is talking to people and trying to make sure they understand what's really going on. I think these devices we carry around and the misinformation that's out there has really polluted the civic discourse, unfortunately.
Creed, excuse me, Creed, can we extend this out a couple minutes? Because I don't want to cut this off right now. Go ahead, Lee.
Well, I just want to add one thing. Like Senator Johnson with judges, I've got a particular affinity for at least one school board member.
Dr. Driggers.
That was great. That was great. What I'll say to answer Tom is that in my experience, I've gotten to know a lot of people up on the Hill from the governor to congressmen to local elected officials. And I think one thing that really permeates those folks is that they're trying to do the right thing by their communities. And we may not always agree on a position on an issue, but I think really, in my experience, it comes from a good place. And if you sit down and talk with them, as the senator said, you can understand where they were coming from on an issue. And just like in the House, I've got colleagues that agree with me and disagree with me, but that shifts from bill to bill, and it comes from a good place. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because I think it's important to note that we are public servants, and so are our local elected officials.
Jake, we're in overtime, but if you got a couple of things to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would echo what Rep. Reeves and Senator Johnson have said. I mean, it is not as bad as you're led to believe, on the House floor. And shifting over to local politics, I mean, everybody has things that they're passionate about. It's hard sometimes to take a breath and consider the other side of an argument. You can't live in an echo chamber. So, and I think that's where bitterness and the divisiveness, that's a perfect breeding ground for that, is just constantly hearing your own opinion back and forth. It makes it really easy to get mad at people who don't agree with you.
Gentlemen, we know you're extremely busy, and we appreciate the time you take to come over here and get harassed by us and let us understand these issues better. And we really appreciate making time for this, and look forward to having you back next year. This will be our last legislative show, but we've got other things planned through the summer, and we'll be announcing those here pretty soon. Just want to again thank Columbia State for making this venue available. It's a perfect place for this show, and it's a beautiful place for this show, and we just look forward to being back next month. The WCTV Creed and his crew make us look really good on TV. We appreciate that. WAKM, Tom Lawrence, I didn't ask your permission to extend the time because you're the one that caused it. So we just deal with it. So and Derby, Williamson Herald, we appreciate your partnership on getting the word out on these and letting the public know what we learn here collectively. So appreciate that. Brady left, I guess. Oh, he's hiding behind Mindy over there. Okay, Brady. And it is Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I had trouble keeping straight whether it's the university or the medical center, but the medical center is a financial partner for us. We appreciate your support there. AT&T and Laura Deathridge, also a financial partner to help make this happen. The Line Leadership Group are our most important partnership here. Terry Wimke back there on the back row in the, what color is that? Pink blouse there. She's the lady that shows up with the coffee here every day, and we appreciate the effort it takes for her to get up and get that done. Chamber staff, of course, Matt Largen, but this Kel McDowell's the quarterback on this effort, and he does a great job with that. Jenna Potter is backing him up, and Nancy Conway backs me up and kind of keeps me informed on what some of the things going out there in the county. But we'll be back here on May 30th. Hope to see you all here and look forward to continuing these conversations. Thank you very much.